Soul intelligence versus perception war. How to access truth directly. This is the conversation that changes everything.
Because right now, at this exact moment, your brain is being hijacked. Your perception of reality, what you believe, what you fear, what you hope for, it's not entirely yours. It's been shaped, engineered, designed.
But here's what most people don't know. There's a completely different way to access truth, a way that can't be manipulated, a way that's direct, a way that's available to everyone. And Darius J. Wright has dedicated his life to understanding this.
Darius Wright is not your typical consciousness researcher. He spent decades exploring the intersection of spirituality and science. He's investigated consciousness at levels most people don't even know exist. He's developed practical methods for accessing what he calls soul intelligence, a form of knowing that operates beyond the limitations of ordinary thinking.
And what he's discovered is revolutionary. He's discovered that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it creates it. That your intuition isn't a vague feeling, it's direct access to dimensional information. That you have the ability to perceive truth that's hidden from those locked in conventional thinking.
But here's what's fascinating. Darius's work isn't just spiritual theory. It's grounded in science, real science, quantum physics, neuroscience, research that's being conducted at major universities around the world.
That's what makes him different. He's bridging the gap between spirituality and science. He's showing that what mystics have known for thousands of years, what shamans and sages have always understood, is now being validated by cutting-edge physics.
And that's the sweet spot, isn't it? That's where the real transformation happens. When spirituality meets science. When ancient wisdom meets modern understanding.
That's exactly what this channel is about. The quantum soul, spirituality at the threshold of science. We're not here to dismiss science in favor of mysticism, and we're not here to dismiss spirituality in favor of materialism. We're here to show that they're not opposites. They're two sides of the same truth.
And Darius Wright is one of the leading voices in that conversation. He's someone who's done the work. He's explored consciousness at depths that most researchers never reach, and he's developed practical methods that anyone can use.
So in this conversation, we're going to explore his insights. We're going to look at how consciousness creates reality. We're going to examine the perception war, how narratives are being used to control what you believe. And we're going to show you how to access soul intelligence, how to break free from that control and access truth directly.
But we're not doing this in isolation. We're going to connect Darius's work to other groundbreaking researchers, scientists, and thinkers who are all pointing toward the same truth, that consciousness is fundamental, that reality is far more malleable than we've been taught, that you have far more power than you've been told.
We're going to talk about Marshall McLuhan, who understood how media shapes perception. We're going to talk about Noam Chomsky, who documented how narratives are manufactured. We're going to talk about Rupert Sheldrake, who discovered how information spreads through fields. We're going to talk about Nassim Haramein, who's showing us the physics of consciousness.
All of these researchers from different fields, different eras, different disciplines, they're all converging on the same insight. And Darius Wright has integrated all of this into a practical method you can use.
So if you're ready to understand how the perception war works, how to break free from it, and how to access the truth that's hidden from ordinary consciousness, this conversation is for you.
Let's dive in.
Let's start with something simple. Take any major event happening right now. A political election, a global crisis, a scientific discovery, a UAP sighting. Now, watch what happens.
What do you mean?
Watch how that same event gets narrated 5 different ways. CNN tells one story. Fox News tells another. Social media tells a third. Your friends tell a fourth. and your own intuition might be telling you something completely different.
So which one is true?
That's the trap. That's the perception war. Because they're all presenting facts. They're all using real information, but they're all filtering it through a narrative. And the narrative determines what you believe.
But people can think for themselves, right? People can figure out what's true.
Can they? Or are they choosing from a very limited menu of pre-approved narratives? Because here's what Noam Chomsky documented in his research on media. The system doesn't work by censoring information. It works by manufacturing consent.
Manufacturing consent?
Exactly. It's not that they're hiding the truth. It's that they're framing it in a way that leads you to a specific conclusion. They're using what Chomsky calls propaganda models, systematic ways of shaping information so that you end up believing what they want you to believe.
But that sounds like a conspiracy theory.
It's not a theory. It's documented. Chomsky spent decades analyzing media patterns. He showed exactly how it works, what stories get covered, which ones get ignored, how language is used to frame issues, which experts are given credibility and which are dismissed.
And this is happening everywhere?
Everywhere. In news media, in social media, in education, in entertainment, everywhere information flows. And the result is that most people are operating from a very limited set of narratives. They think they're thinking for themselves, but they're actually thinking within a box that's been constructed for them.
So how does this actually work? What's the mechanism?
Marshall McLuhan, the great media theorist, he figured this out decades ago. He said something revolutionary. The medium is the message.
What does that mean?
It means the content of what you're consuming is almost secondary to the structure of how you're consuming it. The medium itself, whether it's TV, social media, newspapers, the medium itself shapes your perception more than the content does.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Television is a passive medium. You sit, you watch, you absorb. Your brain is in a receptive state. It's not actively questioning, it's not engaging critically, it's just receiving. And in that state, narratives get installed more easily.
But social media is interactive, right? People are engaging.
Are they? Or are they being fed content that's been algorithmically selected to keep them engaged? McLuhan would say, the algorithm is the message. The fact that you're being shown certain information and not other information, that's shaping your perception more than the content itself.
So the structure of how information flows is more important than the information itself?
Exactly. And that's why the perception war is so effective. Because most people are focused on the content. Is this true or false? When they should be asking about the structure. Why am I being shown this? What's being hidden? What's the algorithm selecting for?
And most people don't ask those questions?
Most people don't even know they should ask those questions because they're operating from what we call brain thinking. And brain thinking is reactive. It's filtered. It's dependent on external authorities to tell you what's real.
Let's define that clearly. What is brain thinking?
Brain thinking is the default mode of consciousness for most people. It's linear, it's reactive, it's filtered through fear, bias, and conditioning. When you're in brain thinking, you're perceiving reality through a very narrow set of filters. Filters that have been installed by culture, by education, by trauma, by the narratives you've absorbed.
Can you give an example of how that works?
Absolutely. Let's say you see a UAP, an unidentified aerial phenomenon. Your brain thinking immediately kicks in. It goes, that's not real. It's a drone, it's a weather balloon, it's a hallucination, it's military technology. Your brain is trying to fit the phenomenon into existing categories. It's trying to make it safe, make it understandable, make it consistent with what you already believe.
But that's just being rational. That's just using logic.
Is it? Or is it using a very narrow form of logic that only accepts certain types of evidence? Because here's the thing. If you're operating from brain thinking, you'll never perceive the UAP clearly. You'll perceive it through the filter of your existing beliefs. You'll see what you expect to see, not what's actually there.
So brain thinking is limiting.
It's extremely limiting. And it's also dependent. When you're in brain thinking, you're dependent on external authorities, media, experts, institutions, to tell you what's real. You're not accessing truth directly. You're accepting someone else's interpretation of truth.
And that's what makes you vulnerable to the perception war.
Exactly. Because if you're dependent on external authorities, then whoever controls those authorities controls your perception. Whoever controls the narrative controls your reality.
So the perception war is really about control?
It's fundamentally about control. Control of consciousness, control of perception, control of what becomes real in your mind. And the tool they use is narrative. The tool they use is the structure of how information flows. The tool they use is keeping you locked in brain thinking.
But there's an alternative.
There is. And that's what Darius Wright has been pointing toward throughout his work. Because he's discovered something that changes everything about how we understand consciousness and reality.
And that's soul intelligence.
That's soul intelligence, and it changes everything. But before we get to that, we need to understand something deeper. We need to understand that this perception war isn't just happening at the level of media and narratives. It's happening at a much deeper level. It's happening at the level of consciousness itself.
What do you mean?
That's what we're going to explore in the next section. Because the real war, the war that determines everything, is a war for control of the collective consciousness. And understanding that is the key to breaking free.
So we've established that the perception war is real. Media narratives are shaping what we believe. Brain thinking keeps us dependent on external authorities. But you said there's something deeper happening.
Much deeper. Because what most people don't realize is that the perception war isn't just a battle for control of information, it's a battle for control of consciousness itself. And to understand that, we need to look at some groundbreaking science that's been emerging over the past few decades.
What kind of science?
The science of consciousness. The science of how reality actually works. And it's pointing towards something that changes everything. There's a biologist named Rupert Sheldrake. He's done research that most mainstream science tries to ignore, but his findings are revolutionary. He discovered something called morphic resonance.
What's morphic resonance?
It's the idea that there are fields, invisible fields that carry information. And these fields don't just exist in one place, they're shared, they're collective, they connect everything.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Sheldrake studied animals. He noticed something strange. When one animal learns a new behavior, other animals of the same species, even if they're separated by thousands of miles, they seem to learn it faster. It's like the information is spreading through an invisible field.
That sounds like telepathy.
It's similar, but Sheldrake calls it morphic resonance. And here's the key insight. This isn't just happening with animals, it's happening with humans too. It's happening with ideas, it's happening with beliefs, it's happening with narratives.
So narratives are spreading through fields?
Exactly. And once a narrative gets strong enough, once enough people believe it, it crystallizes. It becomes real in the collective consciousness. It becomes what we call consensus reality.
But that's not actually real, right? It's just what people believe?
Here's where it gets interesting. According to Sheldrake's research and according to quantum physics, what people believe actually shapes reality. The collective belief creates a field, and that field influences what's possible, what's perceivable, what's real.
So if everyone believes something is impossible, it becomes impossible?
Not impossible, but it becomes invisible. It becomes filtered out. Your brain literally can't perceive it because it contradicts the collective narrative. This is what Darius Wright calls perceptual filters. They're not just individual, they're collective. They're embedded in the morphic fields that we're all connected to.
So the perception war is about controlling those fields?
Bingo. Whoever controls the narrative controls the morphic field. Whoever controls the morphic field controls what becomes real in the collective consciousness. That's the real war.
But how is this possible? How can belief actually shape reality?
That's where we get into quantum physics. And this is where it gets really interesting. There's a physicist named Nassim Haramein. He's been doing research that's bridging spirituality and science in a way that's never been done before.
What's he discovered?
He's discovered that the universe isn't what we thought it was. It's not a collection of separate objects moving through empty space. It's holographic. It's unified. Everything is connected through what he calls the source field, a field of pure information that underlies all of reality.
A holographic universe?
Yes. And here's the key. In a holographic universe, every part contains the whole. Your consciousness isn't separate from the universe. It's part of the universe. It's accessing the same field that everything else is accessing.
So, consciousness is fundamental?
Consciousness is fundamental. It's not an emergent property of the brain. The brain doesn't create consciousness. It receives it. It accesses it. It's like a radio tuning into a frequency.
And that frequency is the source field?
Exactly. And here's what Haramein has shown. This isn't just philosophy. This is physics. This is mathematics. This is science. The universe operates according to principles that make consciousness fundamental, not secondary.
So, if consciousness is fundamental, and everything is connected through the source field, then what does that mean for the perception war?
It means the war is being fought at the level of consciousness itself. It means whoever can control what frequencies people are tuned into, whoever can control what narratives are embedded in the collective field, they control what people perceive as real.
But if consciousness is fundamental, if we're all connected to the same source field, then shouldn't everyone have access to the same truth?
They do, but most people don't know how to access it. They're locked in the brain thinking. They're dependent on external authorities. They're tuned into the frequencies that have been installed by the dominant narratives.
Is there another way to think about this? Another framework?
Yes. There's a physicist named David Bohm. He was a colleague of Einstein, and he developed something called the implicate order.
What's that?
Bohm said that reality has two orders. The explicate order, that's what we perceive. That's the surface level. That's the world of separate objects and events. But underneath that, there's the implicate order, the deeper level where everything is unified, where everything is connected.
So the implicate order is like Haramein's source field?
Very similar. Bohm was saying the same thing. There's a deeper level of reality that's unified, that's holographic, that contains all information. And what we perceive as separate events in the explicate order are actually expressions of that deeper unified reality.
And consciousness?
Consciousness is the mechanism of access. Your consciousness is how you access the implicate order. You're not separate from it, you're part of it, you're always connected to it.
But if that's true, why don't people perceive it?
Because they're locked in the explicate order. They're perceiving only the surface level. They're operating from brain thinking, which can only process information that's already been filtered through narratives and perceptual filters.
So the perception war is keeping people locked in the explicate order?
Exactly. The dominant narratives, the media structures, the algorithms, they're all designed to keep people focused on the surface level, on the separate events, on the conflicts, on the things that divide us. They're keeping people from accessing the implicate order, the level where we're all unified, where we're all connected, where truth is obvious.
So let me make sure I understand this. There's a deeper level of reality, the implicate order, the source field, where everything is unified and all information is available. But most people are locked in the explicate order, perceiving only what's been filtered through narratives and perceptual filters.
Exactly. And here's the crucial part. This isn't just happening at an individual level. This is happening at the collective consciousness.
What do you mean?
Sheldrake's morphic fields, Haramein's source field, Bohm's implicate order, they're all collective. They're shared. So when the dominant narratives are installed in the collective consciousness, they create a morphic field. They create a frequency. And everyone who's tuned into that frequency, which is most people, they're all perceiving the same filtered reality.
So it's like we're all in the same prison.
We're all in the same prison. And the walls of that prison are made of narratives, made of perceptual filters, made of collective beliefs that have crystallized into what we think is reality.
But Darius Wright is saying there's a way out?
There is. And that's what makes his work so important. Because he's not just talking about this theoretically, he's developed a practical method for breaking free. A method for accessing consciousness that's not locked in the collective prison. A method for accessing truth directly.
And that's soul intelligence.
That's soul intelligence. Soul intelligence is consciousness that's accessing the implicate order directly, that's tuned into the source field, that's not dependent on the collective narratives, that's not filtered through perceptual filters, that's accessing truth as it is, not as it's been narrated to be.
So soul intelligence is the antidote to the perception war.
It's more than an antidote. It's a completely different way of being. It's a completely different way of perceiving. It's a completely different way of accessing reality. And it's available to everyone. That's what Darius has been showing us.
But how do you access it? How do you break free from the collective prison?
That's what we're going to explore in the next section. Because understanding the problem is important. But the real transformation happens when you learn how to access soul intelligence, when you learn how to perceive beyond the narratives, when you learn how to connect directly to the source field.
And that's where things get really practical.
That's where things get really practical. Because Darius has developed specific techniques, specific methods, specific practices that allow you to access soul intelligence consistently. And that's what's going to change your life.
So we've established that there's a deeper level of reality, the implicate order, the source field, where everything is unified and all information is available. But most people are locked in the explicate order, perceiving only what's been filtered through narratives. The question is, how do we break free? How do we access that deeper level?
That's where soul intelligence comes in. And this is where Darius Wright's work becomes absolutely revolutionary, because he's not just theorizing about this. He's developed a clear, practical understanding of what soul intelligence is and how it works.
So what exactly is soul intelligence?
Soul intelligence is consciousness accessing reality directly. Not through filters, not through narratives, not through external authorities. Direct access to the source field. Direct access to truth.
But isn't all consciousness direct access?
No, that's the key distinction Darius makes. Most people think consciousness is consciousness, but it's not. There are different modes of consciousness, different frequencies, different levels of access.
Can you explain that?
Sure. Brain thinking, which is what most people operate from, that's consciousness filtered through the brain, filtered through conditioning, filtered through the narratives you've absorbed. It's like trying to see the ocean through a very narrow window. You can see some of it, but most of it is hidden.
And soul intelligence?
Soul intelligence is consciousness that's not filtered through the brain's limitations. It's consciousness that's accessing the source field directly. It's like stepping outside the window and seeing the entire ocean. It's unfiltered, it's direct, it's complete.
But how is that possible? Doesn't consciousness require the brain?
That's the old materialist assumption. But quantum physics and researchers like Haramein have shown that's not true. The brain doesn't create consciousness. The brain receives consciousness. The brain is a receiver, not a generator.
So consciousness exists independent of the brain.
Consciousness is fundamental. It's the ground of reality. The brain is just the mechanism for translating that consciousness into the physical world. Soul intelligence is consciousness that's not limited to brain-based translation. It's consciousness that's accessing the source field directly.
So soul intelligence is more powerful than brain thinking.
Infinitely more powerful, because brain thinking is limited to what the brain can process, what the brain has been conditioned to accept, what fits into existing categories. Soul intelligence has no such limitations. It can perceive anything. It can access any information. It can see patterns that brain thinking can never see.
Let me try to understand this. What's the fundamental difference between brain thinking and soul intelligence?
The fundamental difference is this. Brain thinking is dependent. Soul intelligence is sovereign.
Explain that.
When you're in brain thinking, you're dependent on external authorities to tell you what's real. You're dependent on media. You're dependent on experts. You're dependent on the collective narratives. You're always looking outside yourself for validation, for truth, for permission.
And soul intelligence?
Soul intelligence is sovereign. It doesn't need external validation. It doesn't need permission. It accesses truth directly, and it knows it's true because it feels it. It verifies it through direct experience. It's self-validating.
So soul intelligence is about trusting yourself.
It's more than that. It's about recognizing that you have direct access to truth, that you don't need anyone's permission to know what's real, that your intuition, your direct knowing, is more reliable than any external authority.
But what if your intuition is wrong?
That's a brain thinking question. That's the voice of doubt that's been installed in you. Soul intelligence doesn't doubt itself. It knows. And when you learn to distinguish between brain thinking and soul intelligence, you realize that soul intelligence is never wrong. It's always accurate. It's always aligned with what's actually real.
How can you be so sure?
Because soul intelligence is accessing the source field. It's accessing the implicate order. It's accessing the level where all information is available and all truth is obvious. At that level, there's no confusion. There's no doubt. There's only knowing.
But most people don't experience that.
Most people don't because they're locked in brain thinking. They're so conditioned to doubt themselves, to seek external validation, to depend on authorities that they've lost touch with soul intelligence. They've forgotten how to access it.
And Darius has a method for remembering.
He does. But before we get to that, let's look at how soul intelligence perceives differently, because that's where you really see the power of this.
Give me an example. How does soul intelligence perceive something differently than brain thinking?
Let's go back to our earlier example. A UAP appears. Brain thinking immediately kicks in. It goes through its filters. That's not real. It's a drone. It's a weather balloon. It's a hallucination. It's military technology. It's trying to fit the phenomenon into existing categories. It's trying to make it safe and understandable.
And soul intelligence?
Soul intelligence perceives the same phenomenon, but without filters. It perceives it as it is. It recognizes that this is something that doesn't fit into existing categories. It recognizes that this is something new, something that challenges the existing narrative. And instead of trying to deny it or fit it into a box, soul intelligence simply observes it, accepts it, integrates the new information.
So soul intelligence is more open?
Soul intelligence is completely open. It's not trying to defend existing beliefs. It's not trying to maintain a consistent narrative. It's simply perceiving what's actually there. And because it's not filtered through fear or conditioning, it perceives clearly.
Can you give another example?
Sure. Let's say you're in a conversation with someone. Brain thinking immediately categorizes them. This person is trustworthy. This person is dangerous. This person is intelligent. This person is stupid. It's making judgments based on appearance, accent, status, past experience. It's filtering the person through narratives and categories.
And soul intelligence?
Soul intelligence perceives the person directly. It perceives their energy, their intention, their level of consciousness. It perceives what's actually true about them, not what brain thinking assumes is true. And because of that, soul intelligence can see through deception. It can recognize when someone is lying. It can perceive the truth beneath the surface.
That sounds like intuition.
It is intuition, but not the vague, unreliable intuition that most people think of. This is direct knowing. This is perception that's accessing the source field. This is intuition that's always accurate because it's not filtered through brain thinking's assumptions and biases.
So soul intelligence is like having X-ray vision for truth.
Perfect analogy. Soul intelligence sees through the surface narratives. It sees through the filters. It sees what's actually real. And once you develop that capacity, you can never be manipulated again. You can never be locked into a false narrative again because you're accessing truth directly.
So soul intelligence is about freedom.
Soul intelligence is about ultimate freedom. Freedom from narratives, freedom from external control, freedom from doubt, freedom from dependence. It's the freedom that comes from knowing that you have direct access to truth, that you don't need anyone's permission to know what's real, that your intuition, your direct knowing, is more reliable than any external authority.
And Darius has developed a method for accessing this.
He does, and that's what we're going to explore in the next section, because understanding soul intelligence is important, but the real transformation happens when you learn how to access it consistently, when you learn how to distinguish it from brain thinking, when you learn how to use it to navigate reality.
So we're moving from theory to practice.
Exactly. We're moving from understanding what soul intelligence is to learning how to access it. And that's where the real power emerges.
So we understand what soul intelligence is. We understand how it perceives differently than brain thinking. We understand that it's sovereign and direct. But the question everyone's asking is, how do I access it? How do I make the shift from brain thinking to soul intelligence?
That's the practical question. And the good news is it's not as complicated as you might think, but it does require awareness, it requires practice, and it requires understanding the difference between the two states so clearly that you can recognize which one you're in at any given moment.
So first, we need to recognize brain thinking?
Exactly. You can't shift out of something you don't recognize. So let's start there. What are the signs that you're in brain thinking? Brain thinking has very specific characteristics. Once you know what to look for, you'll start recognizing it constantly. And that recognition is the first step to shifting out of it.
What are the signs?
First sign: fear. Brain thinking is always operating from some level of fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of not being accepted, fear of losing control, fear of the unknown. When you're in brain thinking, there's always an undercurrent of anxiety or worry.
Why is that?
Because brain thinking is dependent on external validation. It's always asking, am I doing this right? Will people approve? What if I'm wrong? That constant questioning creates fear. It creates doubt. It creates anxiety.
What's the next sign?
Reactivity. Brain thinking is reactive. Something happens and you immediately react. You don't pause, you don't observe, you just react based on your conditioning, your biases, your past experiences. Someone says something critical and you immediately get defensive. You see a headline and you immediately have an emotional reaction. That's brain thinking.
And that's different from soul intelligence.
Completely different. Soul intelligence responds. It doesn't react. There's a pause. There's an observation. There's a knowing about what's actually happening beneath the surface. And then there's a response that's aligned with truth, not with fear or conditioning.
What's another sign of brain thinking?
Seeking external validation. When you're in brain thinking, you're constantly looking outside yourself for confirmation. You're checking social media to see if people liked your post. You're asking friends what they think. You're looking to authorities to tell you what's real. You're dependent on external feedback to know if you're okay.
And soul intelligence doesn't need that?
Soul intelligence doesn't need external validation because it's accessing truth directly. It knows what's true. It doesn't need anyone to confirm it. It doesn't need likes or approval or expert opinion. It simply knows.
What else?
Confusion. Brain thinking creates confusion because it's trying to fit reality into existing categories. It's trying to make sense of things using old frameworks. And when reality doesn't fit into those frameworks, confusion arises. You feel lost. You feel uncertain. You don't know what to believe.
And soul intelligence?
Soul intelligence creates clarity. Even when you're perceiving something completely new, something that doesn't fit into existing categories, Soul intelligence perceives it clearly. There's no confusion. There's just, this is what's happening. This is what's true. Clarity.
So confusion is a sign you're in brain thinking.
Absolutely. If you're feeling confused, uncertain, lost, that's a signal that you're operating from brain thinking. That's your cue to pause and shift into soul intelligence.
How do you do that?
Before we talk about how to shift, let's talk about what soul intelligence feels like, because once you know what you're aiming for, it's easier to recognize it when it appears.
What are the characteristics of soul intelligence?
First, certainty. Not arrogance, not rigidity, but a deep, quiet certainty. You know something is true. You don't need to prove it. You don't need external validation. You just know. And that knowing is unshakable.
Can you give an example?
Sure. You meet someone, and immediately you know they're trustworthy. Or you know they're lying. You don't know how you know. You can't explain it logically, but you know. That's soul intelligence. That's certainty without needing to justify it.
What else?
Calm. Soul intelligence operates from a place of deep calm. There's no urgency, no panic, no need to defend or prove anything, just a quiet knowing, a peaceful presence. Even when you're perceiving something challenging or difficult, soul intelligence perceives it calmly, without drama, without emotional reactivity.
And that's different from brain thinking.
Completely. Brain thinking is always activated. It's always trying to figure things out. It's always anxious. It's always looking for threats. Soul intelligence is relaxed. It's confident. It's not trying to figure anything out because it already knows.
What else?
Integration. Soul intelligence integrates new information easily. When you perceive something that challenges your existing beliefs, soul intelligence doesn't fight it. It doesn't deny it. It simply integrates it. It expands. It grows. There's no resistance.
Why is that?
Because soul intelligence isn't attached to being right. It's not defending a narrative, it's just perceiving what's true. And when new truth emerges, it simply incorporates it. It's flexible. It's adaptive. It's alive.
So the signs of soul intelligence are certainty, calm, and integration.
Those are the main ones. But there's one more that's really important. Alignment. When you're operating from soul intelligence, your thoughts, your words, your actions, they're all aligned. There's no internal conflict. There's no contradiction. You're not saying one thing and believing another. You're not doing something that contradicts your values. Everything is aligned.
And that creates power.
That creates tremendous power. Because when you're aligned, you're not wasting energy on internal conflict. All your energy is available for creation, for perception, for action. That's why people operating from soul intelligence are so effective. They're not divided against themselves.
So now we know the signs of brain thinking and soul intelligence. How do we actually make the shift?
This is where Darius Wright's work becomes incredibly practical. He's developed a technique called the observer practice. And it's the bridge between brain thinking and soul intelligence.
How does it work?
The observer practice is simple but profound. Here's what you do. You observe your thoughts without identifying them. You watch your thoughts arise and pass away, but you don't get caught in them. You don't believe them. You don't react to them. You just observe.
That sounds like meditation.
It's similar to meditation, but it's more specific. In meditation, you might be trying to quiet your mind or focus on your breath. In the observer practice, you're specifically creating a space between your awareness and your thoughts. You're recognizing, I am not my thoughts. I am the one observing my thoughts.
And why is that important?
Because the moment you create that space, the moment you recognize that you're not your thoughts, something shifts. Brain thinking loses its grip. Because brain thinking depends on you identifying with your thoughts. It depends on you believing your thoughts are who you are.
And when you stop identifying with them?
When you stop identifying with them, you access something deeper. You access the awareness that's observing the thoughts. And that awareness is soul intelligence. That's the consciousness that's not filtered through conditioning. That's the consciousness that has direct access to the source field.
So the observer practice creates that space.
Exactly. And in that space, something new becomes available. Information starts flowing. Knowing emerges. You start perceiving things that brain thinking couldn't perceive because brain thinking was too busy thinking.
how do you actually practice this?
It's very simple. You can do it right now if you want. Here's what you do. Notice your thoughts. Just notice them. Don't try to stop them. Don't try to control them. Just observe them. Watch them arise. Watch them pass away. And as you're observing them, you'll notice something. There's a part of you that's observing. There's a consciousness that's aware of the thoughts, but separate from them.
And that's soul intelligence?
That's the beginning of soul intelligence. That's the awareness that's not caught in brain thinking. That's the consciousness that can perceive clearly. And the more you practice this, the more you strengthen this ability to observe without identifying, the more you shift into soul intelligence.
How long does it take?
Some people feel the shift immediately. The first time they practice the observer practice, they feel a difference, a clarity, a peace, a knowing that wasn't there before. For others, it takes a few days or weeks of practice. But everyone can access it. Everyone can make this shift.
And once you make the shift,
you start perceiving reality differently. You start seeing through narratives. You start recognizing what's true and what's false. You start accessing information that's not available to brain thinking. You start becoming irreplaceable.
So the key is creating space between awareness and thoughts?
That's the key. And here's something important. That space is always there. You don't have to create it. You just have to notice it. You just have to shift your attention to it.
What do you mean?
Most people are so identified with their thoughts that they don't notice the space. They're so caught in thinking that they forget there's an awareness observing the thinking. The observer practice is just a way of shifting your attention to that awareness, of noticing the space that's always there.
And in that space, soul intelligence emerges?
In that space, soul intelligence is revealed. Because soul intelligence isn't something you have to develop or create, it's something you already are. It's your natural state when you're not caught in brain thinking.
So the shift is just a matter of noticing.
It's a matter of noticing and then practicing. The more you practice noticing the space, the more you practice observing without identifying, the more you strengthen your ability to access soul intelligence. And eventually, it becomes your default state. Instead of being caught in brain thinking most of the time, you're operating from soul intelligence most of the time.
And that's when things really change?
That's when everything changes, because now you're perceiving reality clearly. You're accessing truth directly. You're not dependent on external authorities. You're not locked in narratives. You're free. You're sovereign. You're irreplaceable.
So the observer practice is the gateway?
The observer practice is the gateway. It's the bridge between brain thinking and soul intelligence. And it's the foundation for everything that Darius teaches. Because once you can access soul intelligence consistently, once you can create that space and operate from it, then you can learn to navigate consciousness at deeper and deeper levels. You can learn to access information that's hidden from ordinary perception. You can learn to become truly irreplaceable.
And that's what we're going to explore in the next section?
That's exactly what we're going to explore, because the observer practice is just the beginning. Once you've mastered that, once you can access soul intelligence consistently, Darius has developed methods for going even deeper. Methods for accessing the source field directly. Methods for becoming truly irreplaceable.
So, we've arrived at the point of decision. You've understood the perception war, you've understood how soul intelligence works, you know the AYDA method. But now comes the question that really matters.
What are you going to do with this? Because here's the thing, you've already felt this before. You've already had that moment where you simply knew something, without thinking, without doubt, without needing anyone to confirm it. You've already had that moment where your intuition was right, and logical thinking was wrong.
Of course, everyone has.
Exactly. So you've already experienced soul intelligence. You've already accessed that unfiltered consciousness. You've already felt the difference. And now you know what it is. Now you have a name for it. Now you have a method to access it consistently.
So, what changes?
Everything changes. Because now you won't ignore that voice. Now you won't doubt it. Now you're going to practice. You're going to strengthen it. You're going to become irreplaceable.
How does someone begin?
Simple. Today, right now, you're going to do the observer practice for 5 minutes. Just 5. Sit observe your thoughts, create that space, and feel the difference.
And then?
Then you come back here. You comment.
So we've arrived at the point of decision. You've understood the perception war. You've understood how soul intelligence works. You know the AYDA method. But now comes the question that really matters.
What are you going to do with this? Everything changes. Because now you won't ignore that voice. Now you won't doubt it. Now you're going to practice. You're going to strengthen it. You're going to become irreplaceable.
How does someone begin?
Simple. Today, right now, you're going to do the observer practice for 5 minutes. Just 5. Sit, observe your thoughts, create that space, and feel the difference.
And then?
Then you come back here. You comment. You tell us, what did you feel? Were you able to create the space? Did you notice that consciousness observing your thoughts? What was your experience?
Why share it?
Because when you put it into words, you integrate it. When you share it, you amplify it. And because you're not alone in this, there's an entire community of people here awakening, practicing, transforming. And your story matters. Your experience matters. Your journey inspires others.
What if someone wants to share this with other people?
Share it, but share it with those who are ready. Because not everyone is prepared to hear this. Not everyone is ready to question the narratives. Not everyone is willing to practice. But there are people who are. There are people waiting for this information. There are people who will recognize the truth when they hear it.
How do you know who's ready?
You feel it. Soul Intelligence knows. You'll know who needs to hear this. Share it with those people. Send them this video. Talk about it, because every person who awakens, every person who practices, every person who becomes irreplaceable, they change the field. They change collective consciousness. They change the world.
And for those who want to continue this journey?
If you've made it this far, if this message has resonated with you, if you felt that truth, then subscribe, because there's more coming. So much more. There are upcoming videos that will deepen this, that will show you the science behind intuition, that will teach you the AYDA method in detail, that will transform your life.
And share it too?
Share it too, with those who are ready, with those you feel need to hear it, because this information isn't meant to be kept hidden. This information is meant to be shared. It's meant to awaken. It's meant to transform. You're at the threshold. You're at the point of decision. On one side, there's the comfortable prison of narratives. On the other side, there's the freedom of soul intelligence. The choice is yours. But if you choose freedom, if you choose to practice, if you choose to awaken, then start today, right now, with 5 minutes, with the observer practice.
And then?
You share with those who are ready, you subscribe so you don't miss the next videos, and you continue your journey.
What's the next step?
There are 2 videos on your screen right now. One is the Dimensional Gateway, Science Proves Your Intuition is Real, where we'll explore the science behind all of this. And the other is Beyond the Narrative, Darius Wright's AYDA method explained, where we'll dive into practical details. Click on one. Choose your next journey. Keep awakening.
Which one do you recommend?
It depends on you. If you want to understand the science first, click the first one. If you want to learn how to practice, click the second one. But either way, continue, because the journey is beginning, and you are part of it.